So here we are with the new results from Census 2011. Every census, because they only come out every 10 years, tells you a good deal about how Britain has changed. But in this decade, we've seen more change than we have done in many of those that have gone before. For example, we've seen a massive increase of more than a half in the number of people who are registered as non-religious. The aspect of the census that I'm expecting to get most publicity in much of the press tomorrow is the big increase, the very sharp increase indeed, in the proportion of people who've been born overseas and are currently living in Britain. We can see on this chart here how there's been a real step change in the last 10 years. This is very likely to get written up in terms of Britain being overrun by foreigners. That's almost certainly the wrong interpretation. People are in this category for a whole range of reasons. Some of them are ordinarily resident in Britain for very short-term reasons. For example, they're students doing courses. Others of them might have been living abroad and been born to British parents. Really what this shows more than anything, I think, is a world in which people are more mobile as well as one that's become more ethnically diverse. And it's that mobility that we need to bring out if we're to understand where these numbers come from. Another interesting aspect, obviously, family structure, who we're choosing to live with. We can see here that registered same-sex civil partnerships were not available back in the 2001 data because, of course, that didn't exist then. Whereas it does show up as a small positive number, 105,000 or so of these families in 2011. We're seeing a continuation of the familiar trend of there being more older people now, more over 65s than there are children for the first time, so that's not surprising, and also a trend towards people living and doing things on their own. The proportion of single people is up by 4 or 5 percentage points, and there's corresponding drops in the proportion of us who are married. As well as who you live with, it's also obviously where you live. The long-term decline in the proportion of people who are living in council houses has become more marked. We can see that the proportion here who are renting from the council, the traditional council flat, down from about 13% in 2011 to just 9% today. Something that's more of a disruption with trends that we've seen before is about mortgages, and this really is the credit crunch beginning to bite. We can see that back in 2001, 39% of families using a mortgage to buy the property that they lived in. Well, that's only 33% today. That must be, I haven't checked the earlier figures, but I would bet that's the first time that trend's gone into reverse for a very long time. This is about households where not all residents have English as their first language, and you don't need to see the details. You can just see there's a lot of bars that are quite small, and then there's one that's really big and striking. And London would have a similarly high bar in terms of education levels. It would have a similarly high bar in terms of number of people who were born overseas. But there are some things that London's got less of. It's the only region in the country where there are fewer cars than there are households. So as well as becoming more diverse, we're diverging within the UK. We're seeing places like Wales and the North East on the one hand remain much more as they always have been, while London becomes a really cosmopolitan, outwardly focused city that looks rather different from the nation whose capital it serves as.